Hey guys, it's Becky with Design Bundles, and today I am here to talk to you about stenciling on wood. Now, when I talk about stenciling, of course I mean a vinyl stencil so that we can paint gorgeous designs on a wood surface. So today's project is just real simple, real easy, and I think you'll be surprised at how good the results turn out. So let's go ahead and jump over and get started.
So I scored this really cute design as part of my Design Bundles Plus membership. So I basically got it for free. It did cost me a credit, but it feels like it's free, and that makes my little heart happy. So I downloaded it, and I'm going to bring it into Cricut Design Space. So in Cricut Design Space, I'm going to go to Upload, choose Upload Image, Browse, and I'm going to locate where that file is. It is in my Downloads folder. There we go. Hello, Pumpkin. All right, looks great. I don't need to make any modifications, so I will go ahead and save that. Choose the file that I've saved and insert onto my canvas. Now, I do want to say that I've already measured the wood that I'm going to be working with today. Let me zoom out just a little bit. So let's set that off to the side. What I'm going to do, because I'm working with a wood round, I'm going to draw a circle as a template. So I've measured, I'm going to unlock my aspect ratio, and I'm working with a wood round that's roughly 11 by 8. So it's more of an oval than a round, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm going to switch that to a more pleasant color and bring my design to the front, and then I can increase this design to fit my wood round to my little heart's content. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. And let me also say what I'm going to do once I'm happy with where my design is positioned. And I do this for most of my stencils. I am going to select both of these, and I'm going to go ahead and attach. Okay, so when I click over to make it, everything stays together. Now, the reason that I do that is because this wood is an oval, and instead of trying to figure out where to put my design, I can now use the oval as part of my lining up process. And you'll see more of that in a moment. So now I am using stencil material, and the stencil material cuts just like vinyl. So I'll choose vinyl, and then I can load it in my Cricut and go ahead and cut. So I'll take care of that, and let's convene over in our workspace to take a look at how it all comes together.
Okay, so this is the stencil material that we're using. Okay, it is an Oracal product. It's Oramask 813, and I really like it a lot. It has a special type of adhesive, but if you're just experimenting and you don't have stencil material, that's okay. Use a spare piece of adhesive vinyl, 631, or a temporary adhesive if you can. It just seems to release from the wood a little bit better. We certainly don't, we want it to stick well, but we don't want it to stick so much that we can't pry it loose. So, but when weeding a stencil, remember that you want to weed out the inside. So I know that kind of goes against what we know about weeding, and sometimes it takes your brain just a little bit of extra brain power to wrap your mind around it, and that's okay. All that means is that you must be really good at regular weeding. So you do want to make sure that you don't disconnect the inner parts of your letters, because obviously you do still need those. And we are still going to use transfer tape to transfer this to our project. Now I did put down a little bit of butcher paper here. That's the white that you're seeing underneath my stencil. That is so that when we get ready to paint, I don't have any problems ending up with paint all over my workspace. Okay, so there we go. So here is my transfer tape. It's just a little bit larger than the stencil that I'm going to use. And of course, I still have a squeegee. What I want to do is peel this transfer tape up from the back. Now to get a smooth transfer, I'm going to let it droop on the inside and let that touch down first, right there in the middle. And then you just smooth it to the edges. That seems to work well for me, so hopefully it works well for you. Now when I burnish it, I want to make sure I get the insides of my letters really well. And I don't need to worry about burnishing it on the outside of the oval because we're not actually going to use that part. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over and start my transfer at my oval. You see how that's coming up right there? So you just want to help it along. Stencil material, in my experience, doesn't transfer quite as smoothly as adhesive vinyl, but it shouldn't be difficult either. So if you have a difficult time transferring over your stencil material, it may mean that your cut settings were a little too deep. And that's okay. Sometimes that happens, especially when we have new blades or this is a material that we're unfamiliar with. Okay, there we go. Now, of course, I have some that I can save for later. Now, let's talk about this piece of wood here. Now, this is just a basic wood round. You can find these at a lot of general craft stores. Let me move my stencil out of the way. It is protected by plastic, so I'm going to use a pair of tweezers to pierce the plastic and just start the removal process. Now, yours may not come with the plastic. It's okay. It's not really like a right way, wrong way. Just be careful when you remove it because you can have some loose bark. And of course you want to examine each side and decide which side you like best. I like this side. Now when it comes time to line this up, you want to lay it on a flat surface. I also find it better when I can line up my design as I'm standing over it. So remember, we kept the wood or the oval shape of the wood so that it would help us, but it also helps that this stencil material is semi-transparent so that you can see through it. And you want to smooth this down. Now remember that adhesive vinyl doesn't always stick to wood very well, and that's okay. We're not gonna, hold it against it. It just means that we need to be cautious as we're pulling up our transfer tape. And it's always good to use a low tack transfer tape. And don't be afraid to hold down any pieces that try to come up. Now, some people will coat their wood with a sealant like Mod Podge or even like a spray acrylic. That's okay if that's what you want to do. I find for a rustic project, I don't really want to do that because a lot of times a sealer will leave a glossy finish, and I don't want a glossy finish with my rustic wood. So that part is completely up to you. A lot of people also say that that helps them to not have their paint bleed, but I don't necessarily find that to be true. And while it may be true for some people, I'm not knocking anybody who swears by that method. It just hasn't always been my experience. There we go. So you can set your transfer tape aside. You can use that transfer tape again. And just like if you've done any type of stenciling, you want to make sure that your stencil is completely flat against your wood. So I'm very happy with that. And what I want to do is clear a little bit of space. Now what I have here is I have basic orange and basic brown. I have not got any special type of paint, and all I have are basic foam 1-inch brushes. And that is all we need for this project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my paint a good little shake and get a little bit of paint here on my butcher paper. And we'll do the same for the brown. And what I want to do is of course I got 4 different brushes just in case we need them, but I'm just going to start with one dry brush. And I'm going to start with the orange. Now you notice I did not take my brush and stick it straight in. I want to do very thin, light coats. Okay, now I'm going to dab, especially on this first one. If you use a normal brush, you just want to be really careful because a lot of times it's the brush strokes themselves that can force paint underneath your stencil. So I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to try to vary my colors a little bit but I'm not going to go crazy with it because this is a very simple stenciling project, and I want you guys to feel comfortable with what we're doing. So now I am not gooping the paint on here, I'm simply dabbing a thin layer. Now, if the dabbing bothers you, if you don't like the texture, you can come back over the top a little bit, but just try not to force the paint down. We just want to drag the brush across the surface, and a lot of times the dabbing will create air bubbles, so we can just smooth those away. So now I'm not going to do anything else to that layer right now. All right, I'm just going to continue on. Now again, make sure that you're not using a lot of paint. We want very, very thin layers here. If you feel that you've gotten too much paint on your paintbrush, you can dab some of it off onto your butcher paper, or these paintbrushes are so cheap you can grab another one if you'd like. Now also remember that one great thing with doing these rustic type projects is that rustic does not have to be perfect. So they make really good beginner projects, and then whenever you feel more comfortable with your wood stenciling skills, you can proceed to more difficult projects. Now, you do want to make sure that you do not get any paint outside of your stencil. Now, on top of your stencil, obviously that's fine, but you don't want to cross the border up here. If that's something that you struggle with, you can tape that area off with masking tape. Okay, now here's the most important part. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to walk away until this coat dries, and then I will come back and assess if I need to do another coat. I usually need at least 2, sometimes 3, depending on how bright I want the paint to be. But I want to make sure that this completely dries before I try to put on another coat. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes and I can feel that my paint is completely dry on here. And when I talk about checking how the paint looks, all I mean, and you have to do this very carefully, is to peel up one side and it will reveal your paint underneath. Now, I will say that on the light wood, I'm actually very happy with how bright this orange is held up, but I want to add some variations, and it's not a bad idea to go ahead and apply a second coat. So I'm going to do that. I can use the same brush since it's only been a few minutes. It has not dried out. And I'm going to go through the same dabbing process. I still don't want to brush. Obviously, I want the pumpkin to be very orange. As a matter of fact, the color of the paint that I have is called pumpkin orange. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some variations into the wording. So that means I'm going to come at a diagonal angle with my dabbing. So I'm giving myself a guideline here. Now, like I said, you don't have to do this, especially on your first stenciling project. Okay, but I just want them even, or as even as I can get them. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll add some more paint, and then I'll come in and make them thicker. Now, I don't have to be quite as careful with doing a light coat this time. You still don't want a super thick coat, but at the same time you have a nice barrier already in place by your first coat. I'm going to add a little bit more paint, because what I actually have in mind is some blending. Because I don't want to overdo it on the brown. I don't want to say heavy on the orange, but heavier on the orange, and then I'll come back and do thin brown in the middle, and then we'll start the blending. Okay, so I'm going to get a second brush. I'm just going to take a little bit of the brown. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to do the stem of the pumpkin up here. And I got it a little thick, so I'm going to dab off some of this, and then I'm going to come back in and get some of that paint off. I really enjoy using these foam brushes for that reason, because they're super cheap, which is always good anytime you're working with supplies, but having it cheap and then also being able to be flexible with your painting. So now what I'm doing, I've dabbed a good amount of brown paint on, and I'm going to come back in with more orange and do the blending. So I'm actually going to use my orange paintbrush. And this is why I grabbed extras, because if I end up with too much orange, or if I just end up with too much paint period, then I can come back in and dab some of that paint off. But I'm just trying to do some blending here, and it will also lighten up the harshness of that brown. Now, for us, it doesn't have to be perfect, which, I mean, again, really, you shouldn't put that kind of pressure on yourself for your projects anyway. But the main reason why this doesn't have to be perfect is because the gradient fill that you're seeing that looks so harsh now is going to be a lot lighter, because we're only worried about filling our stencil. Okay, so I need a little bit of brown up here. Now, if I want to, I can still do the same thing that I did before with the orange and just give it some light brushing. Now, I don't want to go too crazy with it because I don't want to end up with a whole lot of brown, and I also don't want to turn the orange into like a murky color. Okay, but this is just a way to kind of make it not just a plain orange. All right, the other good news is you also don't have to wait for the paint to dry for the last one if you get too impatient. I'm a pretty impatient crafter, so if you want, you can go ahead and peel your stencil off. You just have to do it very carefully, because you don't want the wet paint on your stencil to touch back down on your wood anywhere. There we go. But you can see we got some really, really crisp lines here. And once this dries, I am going to wait for it to dry before I pull up my middle pieces. Okay, so here's my stencil. And I'm just going to set it off to the side, or you can go ahead and throw it in the trash. That's not a reusable stencil, so there's not any reason to save it. Okay, so I just can't wait. I tried to wait. It's been a few minutes, but just in case you guys are like me. Now, I did touch the paint that was on the stencil material. It unfortunately is still not dry, but I have a pair of tweezers here. And what is important to know is that if you're pulling a stencil off of wet paint, make sure that you have either a paper towel, or I have this butcher paper here that I'll be able to wipe any paint off, because I don't want it to transfer from my tweezers back onto my wood. So I'm just going to start at the edge. You just want to be careful. You don't want to gouge your wood, especially soft wood like this. This is a soft wood board. There we go. Okay, so I can stick this down. Now that one didn't have a lot of paint on it, but I can still wipe it off on my butcher paper, and we move on to the next one. Also, make sure you're not setting your hand on the paint. You can also turn it to make it easier. As you can see, we still have really crisp lines, so I'm very happy with how this has all turned out. And the great thing about wood stenciling too is it's really easy to mass produce because there's waiting time in between. it would be super, super easy and beneficial. Say if you needed to do 5 of these, then you could knock 5 of them out by putting the stencil, paint the first layer. Then the next wood piece, put the stencil and paint the first layer, and just create almost like an assembly line. Okay, and that is our last piece of stencil. I really want you guys to be able to see how wonderful this turned out. I'm very, very happy with it. I got good coverage with just my basic acrylic paint, and this will be something that will be the perfect addition to my fall decor. So, didn't it turn out really good? I am very, very proud of this, and I cannot wait to put it in my house. So using that stencil material, I feel like it really makes a difference. I always have good results. But again, the key is those light coats of paint and not forcing the paint underneath the stencil by mistake. So I'm really anxious for you guys to get started. This is just one of those projects that unlocks a whole new world of possibilities to use with your machine. So all right, guys, if you have any questions or comments, make sure you leave them below. We do come back and check in with you guys. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that because we always have really great tutorials for you right around the corner. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. We will see you next time.